Now we're going to talk about area. What's area? Well, it's the amount of space inside a flat object, a 2D object. I like to think of it as sort of like if you were painting that shape, how much paint you would need, right? So like if I'm painting the shape, I need a bunch of paint right here like that. There you go. And whenever we calculate the area for a shape, it's always going to be in units squared. So for example, here, both the dimensions that we're given are in centimeters, so the area will be in centimeters squared. So how do you actually find the area of a shape? And that's where our trusty formula sheet is going to come in handy. So you should have this available, ready for you, ready at your side while you're working on any of these questions, because it tells you the area for any shape. Rectangle, parallelogram, triangle, trapezoid, circle. Those are the shapes we're going to be concerned with in this course. One thing that I want you to notice is that for some shapes there's multiple formulas. And it's really up to you which one you use, but I'm going to recommend always use the first one on the sheet. So for example, the triangle has two formulas. Use this one, don't use this one. And for the trapezoid, use this one, don't use this one. Both of them work. I just think that the first ones are easier to use. So you'll notice the first shape we have here is a triangle. And one of the parts of it is 9 centimeters, and one of the parts is 4 centimeters. So how do we find the area? Well, we go to our trusty formula sheet, and we look for the formula for the area of a triangle. So we go triangle, area, right? And I said use the first one. So the formula is A equals BH divided by 2. So let's start by copying that down onto our sheet. A equals BH over 2. So the next thing is, what is B and what is H? Going back to our formula sheet, we can see B is referring to this down here, right? And H is referring to this. So if we go back to our triangle, you can see our B is down here, and our H is the thing that comes up from it. So let me actually label that on here. That'll make it easier. So we're saying that this is our B and this is our H, right? So if we just plug that into the formula, A equals B is 9. So again, I'm going to put it in brackets. H is 4, so I'll put that in brackets as well, and then over 2. So on my calculator, all I'm going to do is 9 times 4 and then divided by 2. So 9 times 4 and then divided by 2 is 18. So the answer here, A equals 18. And remember what we said? Whenever you have an area, the units are always centimeters squared, or whatever it is squared, whatever the units are squared. So there we go. There's our area of the triangle. I want you to try this next one yourself. Pause the video here, try it yourself, unpause it to see the answer. So that's what you should have gotten if you got the correct answer. It was 63 meters squared, and we did that by 18 times 7 divided by 2. Okay? All right, now there are 6 questions below. Notice how these aren't all triangles. I know these first 2 questions were triangles, so we use the same formula for both of them, but notice how these shapes below are not triangles, right? So keep in mind that you're going to have a different formula for each shape, and use your formula sheet to pick out the correct formula. So I want you to pause the video here, try all 6 of them yourself, okay? When you're done, unpause the video and I'm going to go through the solution to each one. Okay, the first shape, it's a square, right? And I mean, there's no square on here, so maybe that confused you a little bit, but if you think about it, a square looks very similar to a rectangle. In fact, a square is a rectangle. It's just a special rectangle where all the sides are the same. So the area of a rectangle is LW, which is just length times width, right? So we can think of this square as a rectangle. Area equals length times width. And in this case, yeah, length and the width are the same as each other, 16 by 16. So it's going to be just 16 times 16, okay? You can find the answer. Well, hopefully you already found the answer to that. B is a triangle. Now it looks a little bit different than the triangle in this one. But remember, we have our base and we have our h that comes directly up out of our base, right? Our height. So if we look here, what's going to be our base? Oops, what's going to be our b and what's going to be our h? Well, if you think about it like this, we can assume that let's assume that that's our base for a second, right? So let's call that b. And remember, h comes directly out of our base. And if you look carefully, you'll notice that this comes directly up from our base, 90 degrees from our base, right? So we can actually call this the height. Oops, let me get my pen out. We can call this the height, right? So you can use that base and that height to find the area of this triangle. This next shape, what shape is it? Well, it's a parallelogram. You can see right on your formula sheet it's a parallelogram. And the equation for a parallelogram, for the area, is just BH, or base times height. You notice that we don't use this side length at all for the area of the parallelogram. We use that for perimeter. So in this case, what do we take? Which lengths do we take? Well, the base, we can assume that this is the base here, right? Which, you know, or this, they're the same length, right? In a parallelogram, opposite sides are equal. So that's the base. So we know the base is going to be 6, but which one is the height? Well, if you look carefully at that diagram on your formula sheet, you notice the height is the one that comes directly out of the base, 90 degrees out of the base. And it's not the same as this side here, that's 3.9. So the correct height is actually 3.8 in this question. So the answer should be A equals 6 times 3.8, whatever that is. That's the correct answer, okay? The next shape is a little bit more of a complicated shape. That's a trapezoid, right? And if we look at our formula sheet, the area of a trapezoid is this fancy thing with brackets. It's got brackets a plus b, h over 2. So let's write out that formula first. A plus b, h over 2. And if you look carefully at your formula sheet, you should see that the a is this longer side, the b is that shorter side that's parallel to it, and the h is the height that goes between those two, right? So if we had to plug in all these things into our equations, our formula, we're going to replace those letters. So a plus b, so it's saying 18 plus 10, right? That's the a plus b part, times h, which is 11. I'm going to also put that in brackets, over 2. Now, maybe you tried calculating this, and maybe you didn't get the correct answer at the end. Or maybe you did, which is awesome. But if you didn't, you got to be careful with our order of operations. Remember, what do we do first in order of operations? We always have to look at what's inside the brackets first, right? So we actually have to add this 18 plus 10 before we multiply by 11. Some calculators, you might get the wrong answer. If you try to do 18 plus 10 times 11 all at once, it might accidentally multiply these first. You got to add these first. So add those first. I'm going to actually do it in 2 steps here. So 18 plus 10 is 28 times 11 over 2. And then I could just plug that into my calculator. 28 times 11 and then divide by 2, and you should get the correct answer there. The next 2 shapes, you'll notice, are circles, right? And we had circles when we talked about perimeter. They had special formulas with that funny symbol in it. And you'll notice for a circle, it also has that funny symbol in it, pi, right? So the area is pi r squared. So let's write that down. A equals pi r squared. So we know that pi is always equal to 3.14. And we're given the radius. Remember, radius is halfway across the circle. So we're given that here. So 5.6. But then we have this little squared. What does squared mean? Remember, what square means is the number times itself. So 5.6 squared, I'll just do this at the bottom. 5.6 squared is equal to just 5.6 times 5.6, right? So you could, on your calculator, you could literally do 3.14 times 5.6 times 5.6, and you'll get the correct answer. Or you could just use the squared button. A lot of calculators have like a power of 2 button that you could just use. The one thing to be careful is don't multiply these 2 things first. Again, remember our order of operations. We have to do our exponents first, so 5.6 to the power of 2, before we multiply. Okay? So do the 5.6 squared times 3.14. If you have a scientific calculator, you should just be able to plug in the whole thing and get the correct answer. And you notice the correct answer is down here, so make sure it lines up with that answer at the bottom. And lastly, F. This question is similar to the previous one. We know it's a circle, so we know the area of a circle is pi r squared, right? So we could try 3.14 times 15 squared. Is that going to give us the right answer? Well, no, it's not, because we didn't actually use the correct r. Are we given r in this question? No, we're given the diameter, right? The radius is only halfway across the circle, right? That would be the radius. So if the diameter is 15 centimeters, how can we find the radius? Well, because it's halfway across the circle, we know the radius should be half of the diameter. So off to the side, maybe over here, I'm going to put that I'm going to do the diameter divided by 2, 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. And that's going to tell me that the radius is 7.5 centimeters. Then use that for your radius in your equation. So it'll be 3.14 for pi and then 7.5 squared. And if you do that, you should get the correct answer. So that's how you calculate the area. Again, the steps are always identify the shape, look at the formula sheet. The formula sheet has the areas on there. And then copy down that formula, right? Always copy down the formula, then plug in your values and evaluate. Be careful with your order of operations when you have an exponent or when you have something like this with brackets. Okay? Good luck on the rest of the problems.